the sound of the bell. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to First Parish in Portland. I am Reverend Dr. Elaine Beth Paris-Lua, your interim minister, and I'm very glad to welcome you to the church. Whether you are being with us virtually through the live streaming, welcome, or if you're here in person, it is great to see you on this almost the end of winter. Can we have a round of applause for the end of winter? I'm going skiing tomorrow. I hope it's the last time I have snow to ski. It's just saying. Whoever you are, wherever you're from, whoever you love, whatever your gender identity or faith tradition, we try very hard each week to make a place where you will feel like you belong. So welcome for joining us. If you're here for the first time, Lori, our membership person, is off this Sunday, but you can see me, and there's new member conversations coming up, and I can tell you more about our congregation if you would like to know. Every week, we acknowledge that the land that this building was built on was once the land of the Wabanaki. We remember that where we live, where we work, where we teach, where we build community belonged to the member tribes of the Wabanaki Confederacy. The Penobscot, the Passamaquoddy, the Maliseet, the Mi'kmaq have stewarded this land for generations. How many of you saw the 5 tribal leaders on Thursday? It was a remarkable, remarkable moment. And I personally made the choice to call our governor to tell her I was very embarrassed, and I thought it very rude that she was not there. So anyone else who would like to do that, I would encourage you to let Governor Mills know that she could have been there. Okay, so that's important. This weekly acknowledgement is really insufficient, and we will continue to move ahead in ways that we can restore that relationship with the Wabanaki, because we were part of the genocide and the colonialism that drove them off their lands. And we've been part of not supporting the treaties and ensuring that the treaties are upheld. In also our ongoing effort to be truth tellers and honest owners and responsible owners of our history, I also like to make an economic labor acknowledgement, which acknowledges that much of the economic progress and development of Portland and Maine is the result of unpaid labor and forced servitude, mostly of people of color and specifically enslaved African labor. And as First Parish tries to move forward in right relationship with all of our neighbors, we honor and remember both the indigenous people and the people of color and the violent histories and legacies of settler colonialism. By acknowledging these historical labor pieces and land acknowledgements, we are accepting responsibility that we, as citizens, need to help this state and our nation move forward and to reconcile and redress all of the harm and the history that was, and legacies of harm. We have a special guest with us today, Reverend Erica Barron, and we're trying to remember where we met. It was long ago. We were both in New England. She is no longer a parish minister, but she has joined the UUA's Congregational Life Staff. So she serves the New England region, helping congregations to live into their mission, form new missions, develop their gifts of spiritual leadership, and she was the parish minister in Rutland, Vermont, and in Catskills in Kingston, New York, and now she lives in Malden with her wife and son, and we're very glad that she's here to talk to us about spiritual leadership in liminal times. Thank you for being here, Erica. And we have 3 announcements that I know of. I'm going to invite Betsy up first to tell us about books in the community read.
Good morning. The community read this year is Mistakes and Miracles. And this is such a good book. It's a book that was written by a UU minister and a UU congregation person. And it tells the story of 5 different congregations who are trying to become more inclusive in their congregation. And it talks about what happened and how they did that, and then what happened, and how they then redid it in some cases. But it's an excellent read. It's got some very good information. And we're putting in an order here at the church for copies. If you're interested in buying a copy, it's $25, which is less than if you ordered it yourself. It's only available from the UUA. It is available through Amazon, but only for Kindle. But otherwise, it's only available through UUA. It's not at the regular libraries. We will have a couple of copies in our library for reference for people who want to see it. But there's so much in it, and it's so rich. I really recommend you get your own. So I'll be out in the parish hall over here during coffee, taking orders for it. And you do need to pay before we send it out. Get your name on the list. It's $25. And next week will be the last week I'm doing this. So if you are on the list and you haven't paid, you need to bring in your payment. And if you get on the list, you still have another week to pay for it or sign up for it. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Bessie. That's very pertinent to our eighth principle conversations. Next is Molly, who has an announcement. Legislative opportunities.
Hi, everybody. I'm Molly Shen. I'm one of the newest members here at First Parish, and I'm so delighted that this church has decided to support a rally that I'm helping to organize with 12 other organizations. It's on Tuesday, the first day of spring, and the rally is to protest that the banks keep funding new fossil fuel projects. So we're protesting, saying stop the money pipeline and let's get a clean planet to live in. So if you're here in Monument Square, 3 o'clock on Tuesday. See ya.
Thank you, Molly. And also Leslie and Jen coming forward. Oh.
Good morning. We have a stewardship announcement this morning. Leslie, what? My hat. Yeah, your hat. Nice do.
Yes, it's a mushroom, Jen.
A mushroom. Okay,
Though actually, I prefer fungi or fun gal. Get it?
Yeah,
Get it?
good
Yeah, get it?
one.
Okay, good.
All right, I'll bite. Why are you dressed as a fungal?
Well, I like to think of First Parish as one big giant fungi. Are you familiar with that incredible honey fungus in the Mayur National Forest in Oregon?
I'm actually not.
Well, this fungus, is anyone familiar with it? I bet some of you are, I knew, okay. The fungus may be the largest organism on Earth. It's around 2,400 years old and weighs around 605 tons.
Okay, that is fascinating, but what does that have to do with stewardship?
Well, Jen, this honey fungus, and in fact all mushrooms, are connected by a network of teeny tiny white filaments in the soil called mycelia. In 1 teaspoon of forest soil, there are about 3 miles of mycelia. They break down organic material and then use those raw materials, make them available for use in the entire ecosystem. And on top of this, 92% of all plant families, including trees, as many of us know, interact with fungi through mycelia.
Okay, interesting.
And mycelia have other important functions and uses. As you know, farming is largely dependent on the condition of the soil. If there is no interaction with fungi through mycelia, plants grow far less well. Fungi are also used to break down toxic substances, such as pesticides and petroleum products. They are used to filter water and even as raw materials for packaging and building products.
Okay, well, fascinating. And this relates to stewardship how?
Well, Jen, just like in a natural ecosystem, everyone here at First Parish is connected. We don't necessarily see those connections, but they are here right now, and they are as vital as the mycelia are in the forest. What happens to one of us at First Parish affects all of us. Whether we come to a service, usher, sing in the choir, sign a petition, read the community read book, participate in faith in action, leave the church, volunteer, respond to an email, and so on, it all has an effect on the rest of the First Parish community. When our community is strong and vibrant, when we're looking out for each other and we're all embracing our roles as stewards of First Parish, then our safety net is strong and healthy.
Okay. And I guess when people step away from the church and we lose members, and we don't have enough volunteers or staff, or our leaders are overwhelmed, when there aren't enough resources for the important work we want to do, then our safety net weakens and gets frayed.
That's right, Jen. But the good news is that we can all strengthen our First Parish network. We can all act as stewards of First Parish. We can volunteer, reach out to a friend we haven't seen in a while, come to First Parish events, including the Music Coffee House coming up on Friday. I'll get to you guys over there later. Sorry, I missed you. And we can participate in stewardship.
Yes, and this year, our role as First Parish stewards is to sign up for there are food for fellowship gatherings. At these stewardship events, First Parish volunteer facilitators will talk with you about generosity and your hopes for the future of our church. We will hand you a pledge card, and we hope you will pledge generously. And you will enjoy a lovely meal. You'll get to meet First Parish community, and you'll have conversations. You may meet new First Parish people, and you will enjoy the fellowship that gathering together can bring.
Yes, and just by eating a meal with others, you'll be strengthening the bonds of First Parish. There are many ways to sign up. There's a link in the weekly e-news. You can return the postcard that you received in the mail, or you can visit the stewardship booth during coffee hour. We're adding new dates, so there's room for everyone, and we're creating some Zoom gatherings for those unable to get together in person.
And the great news is that people are already stepping up to support First Parish. So many people are connected to First Parish and embrace its role as a warm and welcoming place in the heart of the city.
Yeah, we're getting pledges from people who haven't pledged in a while, people who haven't been to church in a while. We're seeing people who've already pledged, re-pledged to increase their amount. Members are increasing their pledges, and new members are stepping up as stewards of this church. Thank you, thank you, thank you, because we can do this, and we are doing it together. So thank you very much, everybody.
And there is an event this afternoon right after church, upstairs at the top of the stairs.
Oh, yeah, so yeah, Lane is hosting an event, and there are still some slots available, so yes, please come to that. I have one more announcement. Music Coffee House this Friday. Where's Brenda? So if you have questions, you can ask Brenda, who's sitting over there on the side. Free event, warm drinks and snacks provided. Una Voce will be singing, come on. Gina Hastings and Bob Fowler will be playing and singing, yay. And Carl Capella, where's Carl? His barbershop quartet. What is it called? Common Bond Barbershop Quartet. It starts at 7. You can come and go as you like, but it will be awesome and fun, and we'll build First Parish community and strengthen our bonds if people show up, and I hope you will. Okay.
Thank you. Now I invite you to enjoy our music person in residence, Jonathan, and the prelude. Allow yourselves to arrive.
Please join me in the chalice lighting and covenant found in your order of service. Love is the doctrine of this church, the quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Our opening words come from one of my new favorite books, Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown. When we are engaged in acts of love, we humans are at our best and most resilient. The love and romance that makes us want to be better people, the love of children that makes us change our whole lives to meet their needs, the love of family, born or chosen, that makes us drop everything to care for them, the love of community that makes us work tirelessly with broken hearts. Perhaps humans' core function is love. And I invite you to join me in hymn number 348 in the gray hymnal, Guide My Feet.
Story time. Story for all ages. Anyone young in body or spirit can come forward and sit with me while I explain to you what churching is. Actually, Leslie just gave a really good explanation of what churching is. It's all about mycelia, right? So, maybe I should borrow your mushroom hat. Yeah, I like hats. Oh, absolutely. Lights are better. There, okay. So, churching. This is a word I heard a long time ago, and it was because I was thinking about taking my children to church, and my father-in-law was a UCC minister. And he said, and my children's dad and I were talking about why should we bring them to church, and which church, and he said, churching is really important for everybody to learn, because churching is all about being part of something bigger than yourself. And it doesn't matter whether you go to a mosque or a synagogue or a church. It doesn't matter whether you're Methodist or Presbyterian, UCC or Unitarian Universalist. It's really important to take your children and yourself to church, because it's like any other discipline. You do something that, oh, I don't think I want to practice the piano today. Or, oh, I really don't want to get on the bicycle today. Or, oh, I really don't want to do the dishes. But you do them because they're important. And what you find out is when you put some effort into something, that you usually get back a lot more than the effort you put in. So a lot of people have lots and lots of different things to do on Sunday mornings now. It used to be when I was growing up, anybody else use that word? When I was growing up, let's all say it together. When I was growing up, and I know children hate to hear that. And I'm not going to talk about walking through the snow for miles and miles. But everything was closed on Sunday mornings. Do you remember that? A long time ago. And so everything was closed so people could go to church. And there was no competition. There was no sports classes. There were no concerts. There was no tournaments. Everything was held on a different day. So people really had the time and the ability to go to church. Now, church competes with a lot of different things. And so it's more of a discipline to get to go to church. And what's really important is you have to get something out of it that makes it worth going to. So, churching is something that we all do together. And the most important part, and I think it comes out of those words by Adrienne Marie Brown, is that the most important thing is showing up. It's just making the effort to show up so that other people see you. So when you're expecting to see somebody, like, I really like seeing Carl on Sunday mornings. And if Carl wasn't here or Rodney wasn't here, I would go, oh, Carl's not here. Or, oh, Rodney's not here. So when we show up, it's not just for ourselves. It's for that other person who really is excited about seeing us. So, show up. And that's all that churching really asks of you, is that you show up. And I wanted everyone to know that we have a children's version of our principles, our UU principles, that Cheryl is going to be talking to our kids about today upstairs. And so instead of them having to learn respecting the dignity and worth of every person, they can learn we help one another. So that's what we're going to do today, is we're going to talk to our children about the different ways that you can interpret our principles so that they're more kid-friendly. So we will sing Cheryl and our wee ones out. Thank you all. And I'll give Leslie back. We will keep our place.
So I invite you just to breathe with me for a moment as we settle into a time of meditation. The words for our meditation today come from a very unique place. So Octavia Butler was the first African-American woman to make it as a success as a science fiction writer in the United States. And she wrote a bunch of really interesting books. I recommend basically everything she ever wrote. But two of them are called The Parable of the Sower and The Parable of the Talents. And in these books, one of the main characters creates a new religion. Or she would say that it was revealed to her, but you know how religious founders go. That line is a little blurry. And that new religion is called Earthseed. And throughout these books, Octavia Butler sprinkles the scripture of Earthseed. And that's where today's reading comes from. All that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. All successful life is adaptable, opportunistic, tenacious, interconnected, and fecund. Understand this. Use it. Shape God. Chaos is God's most dangerous face, amorphous, roiling, hungry. Shape chaos, shape God. Act alter the speed or the direction of change, vary the scope of change, recombine the seeds of change, transmute the impact of change, seize change, use it, adapt and grow. God is change, and in the end, God prevails. But meanwhile, kindness eases change, love quiets fear, and a sweet and powerful positive obsession blunts pain, diverts rage, and engages each of us in the greatest, the most intense of our chosen struggles. All that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. I invite you to just take a moment of silence with me. And let us sing hymn number 299 in the Gray Hymnal, Make Channels for the Streams of Love. Good morning. It is good to be with you. As Reverend Elaine said in her introduction of me, I joined the New England region staff in 2019 in September. So I had this little narrow window before we were never in person for like 2 years. And I finally get to come back and be with you all again, and it's really great. So thank you for having me. As a congregational consultant for the New England region of the Unitarian Universalist Association, my job is to help you congregations in New England with all kinds of things. Questions and struggles, times of celebration and joy, times of like, what do we do now? Ministerial transitions, and sometimes I get to be with you in worship, which is great. So, before I joined the region, and with me since I joined the region, my regional colleagues and I have been developing a way of understanding the purpose of congregational life and the practices that can help us lean into this purpose, and we call this model spiritual leadership. So, spiritual leadership is our term for a way of living that is rooted in your values, giving what is yours to give to the world, and joining with others to create communities of love and liberation for everyone. So spiritual leadership is not only for the leaders, it is for everyone. Everyone can develop their own spiritual leadership, And since every person is unique, spiritual leadership looks different in each individual person. But we can recognize it through the commitment to living our values and offering what we can in community. So at the Region, we believe that the purpose of congregational life at its core is to support everyone in the congregation to find and develop their spiritual leadership, while creating communities of love and liberation for all. We sometimes call that the beloved community. And we have identified 5 practices that congregations can use to lean into this purpose. There are probably more than 5, but these are the 5 that we work with. Covenanting, tending our tradition, doing our inner work, centering in gifts, and faithful risking. And today we are going to talk about faithful risking. But first I want to tell you a story, or paraphrase a story, from Arnold Lobel, who is most well known for Frog and Toad, but he also wrote a book about an owl. And in this book about the owl, there is a story about Owl wondering when he was downstairs in his house what was going on upstairs in his house. And when he was upstairs in his house, he wondered what was going on downstairs in his house. And so he decided he would be in both places at once. And he tried very diligently to do this. But when he went upstairs, he wasn't downstairs. And when he went downstairs, he wasn't upstairs. And so he thought maybe if he ran fast enough up and down the stairs, he could do it. He could be in both places at once. And so he went up and down faster and faster and faster until he couldn't run anymore because he was so tired, and he never managed to be in both places at once. So in the end, he just sat down halfway up the staircase to be in neither place and sort of between them. So one way to talk about a place like that, between two things, is liminality. So a liminal place is the passage from one place to another, but does not really belong to either. So thresholds, for example, are liminal spaces. So are escalators and elevators. Airports can be thought of as liminal places, the place that is in between the origin and the destination, especially the airport you stop at to get your connecting flight. And similarly, there are liminal times. So dusk and dawn are both liminal times, neither day nor night. New Year's Eve is a liminal time, the time between the old year and the new one. And tomorrow, at around 5 o'clock, is the spring equinox here in the Northern Hemisphere. Yay! Today, there's more darkness than light. On Tuesday, there will be more light than darkness, but tomorrow we will be in balance. And in the Southern Hemisphere, the opposite is happening. Tomorrow is the autumnal equinox, the passage from more light into more darkness. Tomorrow is the liminal time, the point of balance all over the globe. The sun will rise at the North Pole, and it will be constantly visible until the fall equinox in September, and the sun will set at the South Pole and will not return to the sky until September. Liminal times and places are important in many spiritual traditions. So, for example, in the fairy lore of Ireland and Britain, liminal spaces and times are possible doorways between the ordinary human world and the fairy realm. As such, they are places of magic and sometimes mischief. In the Hebrew scriptures, the 40 years between the escape from Egypt and entering the Promised Land are a liminal time. In the Christian Gospels, Jesus' followers laying him in a tomb begins a liminal time that ends on the morning of the 3rd day when they return and find the tomb empty. Some liminal times and spaces are part of an ongoing cycle, like the equinoxes. We're going to keep coming back to them. Dawn and dusk, we keep coming back to them. But many liminal times in our lives are times of permanent change, a time of moving from one way of being to another. As a congregation, you are in the sort of classic congregational liminal time right now, which is interim ministry, time between one settled ministry and the next settled ministry. And if we zoom out from the experience of your specific congregation, we can see that congregations are pretty much all in a liminal time right now. This is what you can see from the perspective of the region, because we talked to a lot of congregations. A lot of you all are in liminal time right now. The major disruption of the pandemic made it harder to ignore the ways the context around us is shifting and how that is impacting us. And as we look forward from here, it is clear to me that we are in a time of change and transition in the structure and experience of congregational life. But what is not at all clear to me is what the shape of congregational life will be like on the other side of this liminal time. That makes it really fun to sit with congregational boards and be like, yeah, everything is changing. I don't know. To what? I don't know what to do. We just know it's changing. I have heard that Octavia Butler said that earth-seed spirituality that she invented for her books would not work as a real religion because there is not enough comfort in it. But there actually are people and communities who have taken the teachings of earthseed to heart and practice them as their religion. And I think this is maybe because earthseed deals head-on with the truth of constant change and suggests some actually helpful tools for living in a world that is changing. So Octavia Butler says, but meanwhile, or we might say, in liminal time, kindness eases change, love quiets fear, and a sweet and powerful positive obsession blunts pain, diverts rage, and engages each of us in the greatest, the most intense of our chosen struggles. So Adrienne Maree Brown, who wrote the opening words today, is an author, organizer, and facilitator who studied Octavia Butler deeply. In fact, her first book was an edited volume of modern writers inspired by Octavia Butler. So Adrienne Maree Brown writes about how we can navigate through liminal times as the principles of emergent strategy. And one of her principles is intentional adaptation. So when conditions within and around us, within and around our communities shift, we adapt. And we can adapt randomly, just sort of reacting to whatever comes our way from moment to moment. Or she recommends that we choose to adapt intentionally, to keep our purpose in mind and to work to adapt toward our purpose. So the New England region team, we call that same practice faithful risking. So risking because we are trying something new that may not work out, we are seizing change and using it in some way, and faithful because we experiment in service of our purpose, and we evaluate and course correct in service of our purpose. I can't really talk about faithful risking without going to the metaphor of sailing, because it's just my favorite metaphor for this, right? So faithful risking is like sailing when there is no land in sight, right? You have left the land that you left, you are not in sight of the land you're going to yet, you're out on the ocean. And conditions are constantly changing. The wind changes, the waves change, the light changes, the stars you can see change, everything is changing all the time. And the sailor has to adapt to all of that change. In order not to get totally lost, the sailor has to navigate somehow. And different cultures have different ways of doing this. But my culture relies on the fixed star in the north, also called Polaris, also called the North Star. With that stable point in the night sky, it becomes possible to use all the other celestial bodies to know which direction you are heading, where exactly you are on this great big open ocean, and how to get back on course if you have drifted. So for congregations, that North Star is your mission, or your purpose, your reason for being. What are your unique gifts that you have to offer to this time and this place as a congregation? If you know what your gifts are, what your purpose is, you can navigate toward them even if everything around you is changing. So we might say that for a congregation, the mission is the sweet and positive obsession. And now from time to time, we need to revisit our chosen destination, right? To see if that's still where we want to go. Perhaps we have received some information that makes that destination seem less relevant or less inviting. Or maybe we got to our destination and now we're ready for a new voyage somewhere else. Or maybe there is a change so profound that we need to begin again in thinking about where we want to go and why. So congregations do this by periodically creating a new mission or revisiting the vision or just calling everyone's attention back to the mission and vision you already have. And as a whole, the Unitarian Universalist Association has decided that we should ask the same questions together from time to time. Is this still the direction we want to be heading? Are these still the purposes and principles we want to commit ourselves to? Or do we need a new obsession? Or a new way to think and talk about our ongoing obsession? So in this case, when I say the Unitarian Universalist Association, because people have a lot of different ideas about what that phrase means, because there's a lot of different things that phrase can mean. But in this case, I'm talking specifically about the gathering of congregations. So the members of the Unitarian Universalist Association are not actually people, but congregations. And we do our work together by folks from the congregations coming together, discussing with each other, voting with each other to make our major decisions. And at some point in our past, that gathering of congregations decided that we would write into our bylaws that every 15 years, at least every 15 years, we're going to revisit the core part of our faith. Now, to be perfectly honest, we haven't been great at keeping that promise to do it every 15 years. There was like a period of 20 years, and then we did a little bit, and it's just sort of been a little bit rocky. But we are trying to do better collectively, and so we're in this time right now. In addition, some questions about our principles have arisen organically. And the biggest one of those is the 8th Principle Project, which is recommending an 8th of the 7 principles, which proposes a deeper commitment to accountability in our anti-racism work. So with all of this in the air and the 15-year timeline looming, in 2020, a group called the Article 2 Study Commission was convened. Article 2 is the section of the UUA bylaws that includes the purposes of the association, our 7 principles, the sources of our tradition, our commitments congregation to congregation, our inclusion statement, and our freedom of belief statement. In other words, all the big stuff, all in Article 2. So over the past 3 years, the Article 2 Study Commission has been conducting interviews and focus groups and General Assembly workshops and surveys, all to understand what Unitarian Universalists understand our current faith commitments to be and what we want to commit to that we haven't expressed yet. The 8th principle work has been well represented in this conversation, partly because sort of one of the people who launched the 8th Principle Project, Paula Cole-Jones, is on the study commission, so that's been part of their deliberation as well. And the commission has now generated a proposal that basically takes away the entire current language of Article 2 and writes whole new language for Article 2. And this new proposal names love as the central theological value and ethical commitment of Unitarian Universalism. In other words, love is how they are suggesting we name our positive obsession, the destination we navigate toward together. And it also names 6 other values as the way we live our commitment to love together. One of the things that I found really interesting in the Article 2 Commission's report is that they cite this study that was done in the early 1970s where a researcher interviewed Unitarian Universalists and compared that to a wider study of interfaith, like across religions and people with no religious commitment, that had been done in the late 60s. So, original one, talked to a lot of people, saw how they were different from each other, but didn't specifically look at Unitarian Universalists, and then someone did. So, one of the things that the researcher of Unitarian Universalism found was that Unitarian Universalists valued love as an ethical commitment more highly than any other group. So more highly than any other religious group, more highly than people without a religious affiliation. So that was a while ago. Things may have shifted. But the Articles 2 Study Commission says that they see love still as the heart of our faith. It's just not named in the current Article 2. So they're like, we should say it because it's there. It's the sort of foundation under the 7 principles. So, this new proposal exists, it's out there, and this June, the General Assembly will vote on whether to move this proposal forward. If a simple majority votes yes this June, in 2023, it will come back to General Assembly 2024 for a final vote, which requires a 2/3 majority. So, every congregation, your congregation, is entitled to send delegates to General Assembly to vote on your behalf. And until relatively recently, when we said you are entitled to send delegates to GA, we meant literally get your people to travel to the city in which GA is happening and go in person onto this, giant convention center floor. They give you these little yellow cardstock things that you hold up to vote, and you literally hold up your card, and that's how you vote. But things have been changing over the course of a little bit of time now. So a while ago, we started experimenting with off-site delegates, meaning people who were voting delegates, but were joining General Assembly remotely from home. And it took a couple of years for that to sort of smooth out, but we got relatively good at it. And then in 2020, all of GA went entirely online because we couldn't gather safely. If you can imagine, the people most stressed at the UUA at that time was the General Assembly office, because they had 3 months to take an in-person gathering of several thousand people and move it online. They did a pretty remarkable job. And then in subsequent years, including this year, we've had General Assemblies that are both in person and online. So one of the other changes that has happened recently is that if you are a delegate for your congregation and you only want to go to the business part, so all you're doing is serving as a delegate in the business of the association, you do not have to pay to register for General Assembly. So it is now possible for delegates to go to General Assembly virtually for free to represent our congregations. And these changes have been made for all kinds of reasons, but the biggest one is that we have a commitment collectively to reduce the barriers to participation for congregations that can't afford to pay the money to send their delegates, for people who want to be delegates who can't fund a trip to, in this case, Pittsburgh by themselves, or who don't want to, or who don't have time to spend 5 days doing only this. And so that's why we have business-only registration now. And then the last thing that we've done is the discussions at General Assembly still happen in real time, but the votes don't. So that you don't actually even need to be present at a specific time to vote, because the discussion is also, you can watch it anytime. It's live streamed, and then you can watch the video. So if you're a working adult who doesn't have 5 days to take off from work, you can still participate by watching the discussion and voting. So I really encourage you to choose delegates from your congregation and send them to GA in one of these ways. Proposing changes to the core commitments of our faith is risky. So why do we commit to regularly visiting them and seeing if we want to make a change? Because if change is the only constant, we need to find ways to adapt. And if we want to adapt intentionally and faithfully rather than randomly, revisiting our core commitments can help us to make sure that our obsession stays sweet and positive rather than regressive, reactionary, or irrelevant. The very act of asking the questions can help us make sure we're still sailing in the direction we choose, whether or not we finally decide to change the language that we use to describe our purpose and values. Octavia Butler says, chaos is God's most dangerous face, amorphous, roiling, hungry. Shape chaos, shape God. Act. Alter the speed or the direction of change. Vary the scope of change. Recombine the seeds of change. Transmute the impact of change. Seize change. Use it. Adapt and grow. In other words, although the only lasting truth is change, that does not mean we do not have any agency, that we cannot impact the change. We have all kinds of ways of shaping the change that we find ourselves in, even if the fact of change is not something we can stop. So if we are in a liminal time in congregational life, now is the time to seize the moment and try something. To shape the future of your congregation and to contribute to shaping the future of what congregations can be, this is the practice of faithful risking, taking a chance that is aligned with mission, even when we don't know exactly where it will take us. The twilight lingers, we cross a threshold. We set sail to find a way to live our values more deeply. We find the old commitments have lost their power, and we ask what we can commit to now. This is how we remain faithful as we move through a changing world. So, may your journey as a congregation and as people through liminal time and space be rich with good questions and deep responses. May you find a sure direction. May you follow it purposefully and joyfully. May it be so. So I couldn't really have a sermon about sailing and not sing Blue Boat Home, so we're going to sing Blue Boat Home, which is number 1064 in the Teal hymnal. Oh, below me I feel
Thank you, Erica. Now is the time during our service when we receive the offering. Your offering is part of everything we've talked about today. Churching, connections, mycelium, mushrooms, supporting the earth, and most importantly, love. Love is the doctrine of our church, and your financial contributions are one way that you demonstrate your love for this community. Thank you.
Here may you know that you are lovable, that indeed you are loved. And may you carry that love out into the world as a blessing. I invite you to join in the unison benediction and extinguishing the chalice, after which you can greet each other and head to coffee hour as we have some exiting music. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.